Okay, so then establish this motivation in listening to the teachings, that you are listening to the teachings in order to know how to practice the Dharma, in order to gain the wisdom that will enable you to be of benefit to beings in the short term, and particularly in long term, ultimately, by establishing beings, all mother beings, in a state of awakening, Buddhahood. So give rise to that way of thinking right now, and then notice the feeling of it. Learn what the feeling of this bodhicitta is, what it feels like. And then maintain that, and then notice when you lose it, and then refresh, reset that bodhicitta motivation. This is important to know how to do that. I said this aspiration, bodhicitta, is the thought to attain enlightenment. It's the wish to attain enlightenment. But it also, like our thoughts in general, there is a feeling, there's a tone that comes with or in the wake of thoughts. So maintain and continue to listen and have bodhicitta. They're not, bodhicitta shouldn't block out your ability to function. But it does take getting familiar with bodhicitta. If it's just words that you use at the start of the day or at the start of a practice, then it's just you won't associate it with your mind, the full experience of your mind. So words are a gateway, a doorway to understanding. And so bodhicitta there's lots of words. That's what we're studying here, all the words that Shantideva gathered together through his realization and his erudition, and essentialize. He brought all the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha into these few chapters. And the whole purpose of it is to learn and practice in order to gain wisdom. And as we mentioned in the previous chapter, carefulness, like how this mood, this bodhicitta mood and this bodhicitta sort of mental atmosphere or feeling, how that becomes lost, how it becomes lost or corrupted is through the habitual familiarity, through our habit of our mental afflictions. And so that's really the target, the subject matter is the target of our training, and being careful and being mindful and being aware, being introspective. We need these three abilities. We need to train again and again in these three abilities in order to reduce our mental afflictions. And our sort of status as a beginning baby bodhisattva will be able to grow that bodhicitta and continue to grow it once we recognize and are able to overcome our habit, our afflictive habits. And I'm sure you all know that those afflictions, the main afflictions of ignorance and attachment and aversion, and know what they feel like. But what we're offered here, what Shantideva is laying out for us here, are how to intercept anger that we feel, or how to intercept this craving that we feel before it gets to be a craving or a anger or a complete indifference, the foggy haze of indifference. Any of these three poisons, for beginners, it's really too late to do anything. And we just have to kind of remember that it's impermanent and try to control ourselves and not create more of a mess. But through the teachings here, and I would remind you, or through these more secondary levels of these 3 or 5 afflictions, we can begin to notice them sooner, but they have different names. So we should learn what those 20 secondary afflictions are and remember them. Those then we can begin to notice before we are angry, before we are lost in delusion and confusion and desire or jealousy or doubt or pride. There's experiences that come before that we should learn to recognize. And so we, I guess a few months ago, then in the previous chapter, then I presented those 20 secondary mental afflictions, and then now, because recognizing them is how you preserve this bodhicitta, this mind that is intent on attaining enlightenment, this mind that is cultivating love and compassion, this noble kind of inspired mind. When we are afflicted by our habitual, the force of our habits of these afflictions, then that's gone, because we're not used to it yet, to the point where it outshines our afflictions. So we want to get to that point, and that's the subject of these 3 chapters: carefulness, there's introspection, which includes mindfulness, and then the subsequent chapter on patience. So these are very, for us, these are, for beginners, then these are really, we need to study these verses and learn them, learn what they're pointing to, what they are, what practice accompanies these verses, and then put those practices into play. So right now, we are in the in this section of protecting our bodhicitta, and what Shantideva has been, where we are here is in these 27 there's sort of 27 sources that give rise to mistaken conduct. And last time we went through the first 13 of them. Sometimes, I mean, in the teachings of Buddhism and in the Abhidharma, there's volumes and volumes of lists. And if you have the inclination and the time to learn and want to become a very learned in the Buddhist teachings, then there's plenty of things to learn. Like there's almost, I guess, no end to your learning. But if Shantideva, in his enlightened wisdom, kind of consolidated things and put them in this order of these 3 sections of arousing bodhicitta, protecting bodhicitta, and bringing bodhicitta to perfection or the flourishing of bodhicitta, then we don't need to go too far afield in order to practice it. What we want is practical advice, and so I'm not apologizing for lists here, because here these lists are very helpful, because it gives us signposts to recognize. If we don't know these 27 sources that give rise to mistaken conduct, we'll just continue to just barge through the day. and not give any consideration to your own future, the future of all beings, and your bodhicitta. So mindfulness means pinning your mind to an object. In general, mindfulness means pinning your mind to an object. And so you need to have an object. And so your object is bodhicitta. So I'd say bodhicitta should be a code word for you, for us, that opens up the whole spectrum of what bodhicitta means in its absolute aspect, its relative aspect, its aspirational aspect, its engagement aspect. It should open up those qualities, those attitudes that came about through practicing the practices of the first 3 chapters. So mindfulness then means mindfulness of bodhicitta and the precepts of bodhicitta, the discipline or the precepts of bodhicitta, how to practice it, the trainings of a bodhicitta. We say precepts. And so since we are not habituated, we haven't naturalized the precepts of bodhicitta yet, the training of bodhicitta yet. And so we need to be on guard for those things that will cause us to lose our mindfulness of those trainings. And how we know whether we've lost our attention to bodhicitta, our continuity. We think of bodhicitta, some aspect of it, have some sort of sensation of this aspiration to attain enlightenment, some compassion for sentient beings. This aspiration to attain enlightenment sort of triggers some kind of our wisdom quality, our knowing quality. And our knowing quality is directed towards the perfection of that knowing, towards awakening to our absolute nature. And then on the other hand is this compassion, our compassion quality. And then we get annoyed and irritated. And we inflame that. We throw a log on that fire of being irritated. And then we begin to notice it. And then sometimes we can react to, we don't even care about bodhicitta. We lose our respect for it. It's too Buddhist, it's too somebody else's business. And that's when our afflictions have gotten too powerful, because we haven't paid attention. We've lost our mindfulness. And introspection is this backdrop, this panoramic knowing of whether or not we are being mindful or not. So it's not just mindfulness, but it's knowing if we're mindful. And mindfulness is that power of our mind to go from, how do I say, pinning our mind to an object, say bodhicitta training. And then there's a second moment of that. And then there's a third moment. And there's a fourth moment. There's a continual mindfulness of the precepts So mindfulness can be strengthened to create a continuity. And this awareness, or this vigilant introspection is the name of this chapter. This introspection is what pays attention to whether that mindfulness is on board with the precepts as its object. And so the slightest little quivering of our mindfulness occurs because of these 27 things. Of course, these are just categories. There's probably tens of thousands of variations of these. But so these are what Shantideva is highlighting for us to know, to learn, to reflect on, to identify, and then to keep and use them. Okay, then I think verse 51, I think we're at. Because what these the level of these is more on the level of like the beginning of an urge. That's why I like this word urge. Like someone who is addicted to tobacco. Every so often they get this urge, and then they physically start looking for a cigarette in response, and then they satisfy that urge temporarily. Okay, anyway, so like that. So that's kind of the level here. So this is particularly important if we want to gain wisdom. If we want to attain wisdom, knowledge, sharab, if we want prajna, then we need to know these. Because prajna comes, this wisdom I'll mention later. So 51, it says, and when you yearn for wealth, attention, fame, a circle of retainers serving you, and when you look for honors, recognition, it's then that like a log you should remain. So in the same, with the same kind of poetic rhythm of what Shantideva was speaking about in the previous three verses. So this fourth verse of that section of these 27 sources that give rise to mistaken conduct. First is this desire, that we have this urge or this desire for some material gain. It's kind of associated with maybe coveting, covetousness, food, clothing, and so forth. And then attention, like, or we want to be respected. We have this urge to be respected. Like you walk into a room of strangers and certain afflictions start popping up. You want, and so this wanting to be, attention, or I think the word is more like respect, or we want to be looked up to. We have this urge or this need or this wish to be looked up to. Some kind of special treatment. And then we want to be recognized. We want sort of public recognition. The word here is a fame. Fame. We want to be famous. This is really very current afflictions. This is one of the. I think this has become the new #1 affliction of modernization. The modernization of the world is this urge, this need, this craving to be known, to be liked, with all of the ramifications of what that word means and how to protect that and so forth. How to make money off of being liked, It's really unbelievable. Well, it's very believable. So that, anyway, we should regard all of that, not being content with your clothing and food, and craving more, and wanting to be looked up to, or this attention and respect, and then famous, as simply a waste of time. It's a waste of time. A circle of retainers, because now, I don't know, this is, of course, Shantideva's counseling his clerical brethren and monks and people. And I know a lot of people who did retreats and so forth, and told even such a one as they told me, for whatever reason, how they spent 3 years just working really hard so that they'd be able to have an easy life afterwards, because they'd have food, and they'd have helpers, and they'd have attendants and personal attendants and all this kind of thing. So that's one of the shadow side of institutional Buddhism as a religion. If we need people to carry out a worthwhile purpose, then it's not the same. You gather people around to help you carry out worthwhile projects and dharma activities. But it's when you are wanting to be the center of a group of personal attendants. And then so that's 14, 15, 16, and 17. Then the 18th here, I don't know this one in English, it says, and when you look for honors and recognition, this is specifically about a desire for personal service. You want people, if you want somebody to personally take care of you. Maybe a lot of people get married, and each one of them thinks that way, that they'll, whichever one of them, without even thinking, well, okay, what's the benefit to me of this relationship? Somebody's a good cook, somebody makes money, somebody knows how to iron, somebody knows how to balance the checkbook, so there's this that attitude of wanting to be personally taken care of by others. So as Shantideva says, a bodhisattva doesn't think about, doesn't want or doesn't have a urge to have a personal servant, a personal attendant like this. So when these things come up in our minds, then he said, then just completely relax, notice it, completely relax, and restore your bodhicitta attitude and just let it dissolve. And not particularly, like lag means don't let your body, speech, or your mind follow that way of thinking, that urge. And then verse 52 says, and when you are inclined to overlook another's need, so then we're really giving up. We're actually violating, or we've broken our commitment to benefit others as a bodhisattva. But if we think it's too much trouble to help someone, or they're not really maybe they're not the kind of, you'd rather help somebody else. You know, they're not almost worthy of your help for some, you know, discriminatory habit you have towards someone. So we shouldn't. We should notice when we are inclined or when we have this urge to not help somebody, even if it's just a small little opportunity that you have to help someone, to benefit someone, not to overlook that. And when you want to get the best thing for yourself, so this is just blatant egoistic thinking, that you take the best for yourself. And when you notice that, these we should. This is why the first chapter is so important to have in our memory, to get familiar with this, because this first chapter will, even like when we overlook another's needs, that one, as that arises, just if the greater familiarity you have with the contents of the first chapter of this text, then just that alone should just wash away that thought. And of course, things like this, best thing for yourself, the operative term, the term there is self. It's self-clinging, and so that's going to take. That's what's dealt with in the 9th chapter, primarily. And when you feel the urge to speak, that is to say, kind of just pointless speech, impulsive, pointless speech, that's destined to give rise to irritation. Either you as the speaker are saying something and it's going to irritate you to say it, or it's going to create desire, or it's going to create it in others. So when you feel the urge to speak, So like we say this, our mouth is the gate of non-virtue. And there's 10, as you know, we talk about these 10 categories of non-virtue. 3 physical, 3 mental, 4 verbal. There's one more verbal. So if we are attuned or we're familiar with those, then that should interrupt and correct that urge we have to blurt, to say something that's going to cause dissension or some other non-virtue in ourselves and in others. Then it's like a log, you should remain. And impatience, impatience, indolence, faint-heartedness, and likewise arrogance and careless speech, attachment to your side. When these arise, it's then that like a log you should remain. So there's the 27. So impatience here means more like intolerance or intolerant. Personally, then as a Dharma practitioner, we should be able to accept some suffering for Dharma practitioners, and that's how that's how we come to wisdom, as knowing how to use all of our experiences on the path. And so we need to be able to put up with inconvenience to some measure, well, to not some measure, but to the measure of our capacity, so that our practice will be like if once you get a fire going and a wind comes, it just causes the fire to become more powerful, more light, more heat, more interesting. But a same breeze on a candle, then it blows out. So we need to take a measure of our capacity, but always have this almost wish, or this wish to give up our comfort zone, to step out of our comfort zone. And indolence is just laziness. And laziness, being indolent or disinterested in what's going on in your mind, just takes away your mind's power and takes away mind's joy. And joy and power are qualities that we want to increase. And so laziness has a way of dampening, tamping that down. Then faint-heartedness. Faint-heartedness, basically fear. Fear also steals our power, takes away our power, robs us of our power. And as a beginning bodhisattva, when we perhaps read about the exploits of bodhisattvas, like the real advanced, higher level bodhisattvas who have a greater wisdom and a greater capacity through their compassion to engage in in actions for the benefit of others that it becomes a little bit, we get a little bit overwhelmed or scared by the scope of these Mahabodhisattvas. And even this absolute truth, absolute bodhicitta, the truth of the shunyata, emptiness, the empty nature of all phenomena can provoke a kind of a fear in us. And so we should notice that and practice patience. Of course, the next chapter, chapter 6, is deals with that at length. So that's this fear. We need to be patient. And likewise, arrogance. Being this kind of arrogance means kind of being boastful and pretentious. And careless speech means kind of just talking nonsense, random speech, or speech that is unrelated to reality. It doesn't correspond with the situation. Anyway, it's a term, careless speech. And also, careless speech is sort of teaching the Dharma when you haven't studied it. Just taking sort of a pot shot at what you think Dharma might be, and then blurting it out. Okay, then. Of course, these, the majority of these are remedied kind of on the spot, just through the force of mindfulness and alertness, or introspection. Because mindfulness and introspection are an expression of mind's power. And so oftentimes just being aware or introspect, that kind of being vigilant has the power to dissolve this or that one of these arisings, these urges, just on the sheer presence of being alert or aware, introspection. And then mindfulness, then you reset in the freedom of that, then that you reset your mindfulness on bodhicitta, love and compassion, and so forth. This last one, the 27th one, is attachment. It says attachment to your side. Of course, this has to do, with being biased towards your group, or you. You have a prejudice to your own opinions, or you're kind of biased. Why would I say it if I wasn't biased about it? Your analysis and so forth. But attachment to your side, there's from a worldly point of view, then we have clubs and groups and so forth. And we fight for our group. And then there's from the Dharma side, okay, from the Dharma point of view, then also there's, we have sides, perhaps. So when you feel the rising of your bias towards your own lineage, your own tradition, then check that out. Check out and release, become free of that kind of bias. I know in the Vajrayana particularly, it can be a problem. Well, it's a problem in society, and if it's a Dharma society, then there's going to be Dharma problems. You know? If it's a worldly sectarian group, then there's going to be worldly problems. This attitude, your side can't help. It's just the function of confusion to produce bias towards your side. So notice when that comes up from a Dharma point of view. You know, there's some schools that don't accept the validity of other schools. Even some followers of some collections of texts that are purported to be the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, then they don't accept what other group may accept as a text of Shakyamuni Buddhas. This is a problem. So when this prejudice or this clinging to your side comes up, then that is a cause, or that is the beginning of a negative conduct. Palto Rinpoche, you read in Palto Rinpoche's teaching, how we have to some people, he was referring to some people, and maybe who are, they're very they have such faith in their guru. Of course, Palto Rinpoche was, Vajrayana, Mahayana proponent, but of course, in our Vajrayana tradition, then like the guru is the Buddha, and you're focusing on one individual almost as the representative of all sentient beings who all have Buddha nature. Well, you can't progress dealing with all sentient beings. It's way too complicated. There's too much. We can't accept that as a path. So we just focus on one. All right, this one that seems to fulfill all the qualifications that I can now rely on them and their Buddha nature. And I'll just call them Buddha until I realize my Buddha nature through merging my mind with my guru. And then then the Buddha nature of all beings becomes realized. That's the Vajrayana path, one way of going. And so, but it's very easy to become very have a very pretentious faith. And everywhere you go, you talk about my guru this, my guru that. And so Palto Rinpoche said that we need to be very careful to distinguish true faith and devotion from this, basically what he called, it's just bias attachment. Kind of a bias attachment that gives rise to a pretentious kind of faith. And so he, on this point, attachment to your side, he was, because this commentary was, I'm using this commentary of Khenpo Kunzang Palden, who is a disciple of Paltru Rinpoche's. I know I heard that somewhere. It must have been in the commentary. Yeah, he said, be very careful as you bodhisattvas, that you don't mistaken or be able to distinguish your own relationship to your lineage and your tradition, and don't confuse that with just a bias attachment. I know these. We all maybe in the Tibetan tradition, we're maybe very familiar with the Rimé movement of 19th century Eastern Tibet, principally, that we call non-sectarian. And even within and I'm not a scholar or a knower of all these things, but what non-sectarian, some people think non-sectarian meant that you just go and just absorb everything from every place. What Chakta Rinpoche called your path just becomes a big tukpa, a big, what do you call it, a big stew of something, and it doesn't go anywhere. Just a big pot of mixed things, no precision, no definition, no distinction. But to maintain this pure view of your tradition and practice it in a very pure way, just as it was received, and at the same time have that same view of how others are practicing their tradition. That's what the Rimé means. Not that you yourself just go out and just collect all these things from other traditions and consider yourself to be non-sectarian, but you find your path and you follow it to the end. If you want to get to the end of a path, then you need to follow it to the end. If you want to become a scholar or a historian or a collector of spiritual practices and artifacts, then you're on your own. But if you want to accomplish the path of awakening that's promised in your tradition, then stick to it. That's what, and so Rimé means having that kind of almost obsessive dedication and devotion to your path and your teacher and your lineage, while at the same time having no bias or prejudice against any other tradition. And almost you rejoice, practice rejoicing in others in their practice and encourage them as if the opportunity ever arises, not try and convince them that, well, if you were on my path, you wouldn't be having these problems. So this we need to contemplate. This was a big point for Paltru Rinpoche. Okay. That's why sometimes it's just good to just stay quiet and humble and just move in a very step-by-step, thorough and gradual way, so that you don't get too excited about your own practice and your own path. Okay, so that's those items. So if you can uh, glean and kind of itemize or do these so that you have some points of reference, because these things will pop up. And so when they pop up, they're like little alfalfa sprouts, you know. And if you just notice them, they'll just wither, and your bodhicitta will become more familiar and more powerful, because it's connecting even at the very outset. This wish for enlightenment, you're already tapping into your potential for it to occur. Your Buddha nature pervades all phenomena. All thoughts and emotions are pervaded by your Buddha nature. So if we cling to our thoughts and emotions, then that Buddha nature is not revealed, it's not seen. So we need to be selective in our practice and connect our bodhicitta when we give rise to the aspiration to attain enlightenment, and do so with a concern and compassion for the suffering of those who are not enlightened, oneself and others. Then you are making a connection with your Buddha nature. And it's important to maintain that connection. That's why these 3 chapters, the 4th, 5th, and 6th chapters, keep that connection from breaking. Okay, then. So then he says, examine thus yourself from every side. This is vigilant introspection speaking, he's speaking about, so examine yourself from every side and take note of your defilements and your pointless efforts. So your defilements, so it means if we can examine ourselves and then note our defilements, then they'll probably be in the category of these 27. They won't be, when you're enraged or when you're obsessed or when you're completely indifferent and disinterested, then you're not taking note of anything. It's too late. You've lost your ability to take note. So that's why these 27 will give you your introspection will be able to notice these. It's not the end of the world, So then take note of your defilements and your pointless efforts. So notice these defilements come up. Maybe they'll just dissolve again. They weren't there, then they are there. They're impermanent. Notice that they're impermanent. Meditate on, if they don't disappear, then meditate on them being impermanent. And the truth of impermanence, which is their nature, will hasten their dissolving. In other words, they won't, your speech and your behavior won't be affected by them. And even your thinking, your train of thought will be interrupted by your introspection, by the power of your awareness of them, and they won't stay in your mind. And pointless efforts means, we pay far too much attention to body, speech, and mental activities that have no purpose, that are meaningless, and at the end of the day, they're meaningless. So we need to be able to correct our negative habits and to create a virtue, to create wholesome, noble, positive actions, mental, emotional, and verbal, and physical. Of course, to create virtue in that way, that means like virtue, like out of what do they call whole cloth, like new, like you just new virtue, not just like responding as a decent person to a situation, but just completely almost in the absence of negativity, you create a virtuous atmosphere in your mind, create compassion and joy, or move towards wisdom, meditate on impermanence, meditate on the suffering of samsara, meditating on how everything arises from causes and conditions, these things. For thus the heroes on the Bodhisattva path seize firmly on such faults with proper remedies. So we are then following in the footsteps of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in our own way, in our own honest, genuine way. By when you notice small negativities and dissolve them, or not allow them to grow, and they are antidoted, then that's what bodhisattvas do. That's what Buddhas had done. That is the path of enlightenment. So you need to know the targets, the kleshas, these afflictions. We need to know the afflictions, and we need to know the antidotes. And we need to focus our mind on the Dharma. Like it says, the bodhisattvas, they seize firmly on such faults with proper remedies. So we need to be able to get used to this system here, and so that we do that. Bodhisattvas get a grip on their mind. We need to get a grip on our mind, as a manner of speech. We need to get a grip on our mind. So this is how it's done. Okay, so that's that section. Okay, then this next few verses, next 3 verses, 4 verses, have to do with virtue. We're talking about the afflictions. Now we're talking about how do you practice virtue. And so Shantideva here lists what seem to be known as the 9 points of practicing virtue. Another list. We haven't had that many lists, but these are essential. Like, how do you practice virtue? Is it just like doing a good thing with a good intention and things like that, or what? So these are what will make our virtue genuine and not just imitative. We won't just be imitating others, even imitating the great bodhisattvas, but they will be genuine, our virtue. It should be genuine, and so we need to know what these are. So here in verse 55, he starts out by saying, with perfect and unyielding faith. Well, actually, what this, I'm not, what this, I'm not the perfect and unyielding faith. This is actually, this first line is the first point of virtue, which is actually, it should be confidence. We should be confident. I don't know if perfect and unyielding faith, maybe that means confident, but here the Tibetan, the Shindu Nepa means very confident and kind of devoted to the practice. Maybe, I think in the commentary he talks about, okay, you young bodhisattvas now should go into retreat and practice virtue. And how you do that is by implementing these points that he's expressing here with this, we must be clear about whatever practice we're going to do before we do a retreat on it, or before we undertake it, let's say. We should be clear about it. Even like you're going to sit down and do a practice, a meditation practice, whatever it might be, and we need to be confident, and we must have devotion, meaning we must be able to connect the practice that we've inherited, that we've been given, with perfecting bodhicitta. Okay, this is how I will perfect bodhicitta. This is how I will attain awakening, is through this practice. And be confident in what the points of the practice are, what the different points of the practice are. So then, before we practice, we do need to learn and study what constitutes this practice, and think about what we've learned and studied, so that we don't have any misunderstandings about it. And then we should consult with the teacher, who probably gave you the practice. So this is actually, since wisdom, the 9th chapter here is prajna, it's a wisdom, and it says in the first verse, the whole point of all of this, all these other 8 chapters, the whole point is wisdom. And so wisdom also begins by learning and studying. So if we have the wish to engage in a practice, then we should gain the wisdom of studying it, of learning it, and then contemplate what we've learned about it, and gain the wisdom of contemplation, which is that you're kind of free of misunderstandings, or free of not understanding. And then you engage in a meditation. You meditate on what you understand that you've learned, and then you gain the wisdom of meditation. So there's 3 aspects to prajna, to wisdom, to what may be called knowing, knowledge, the wisdom of learning, the wisdom of reflecting and resolving doubts, and then when you are free of doubts, then meditating, meaning then basically submit what you've learned and have confidence in, submit that to the full range of your experience, inner, outer, and in between. If you're not confident in the practice, then there'll be hesitancy. Some part of you won't accept, it won't go fully. So we really need to engage in these three kinds of knowledge: the knowledge of studies, the knowledge of contemplation or reflection, and then gain the knowledge of meditation, or wisdom from meditation, wisdom from contemplation, wisdom from learning and studying. So when we practice, then we should know, principally we should know what are called the three sacred aspects, or the three excellent, or three sacred parts of the three sacred points of the practice, which is the beginning, means this motivation. What is the motivation? And in the main part of the practice, it should be free of concepts. And then the sacred point of the concluding phase of the meditation is dedicating the fruits of your efforts to all beings and making aspirations, sort of propelling yourself forward through aspirations. So we need to know how to practice by learning and understanding what happens at the beginning of the practice, what happens in the main part of the practice. Of course, we can't necessarily, as beginners, we can't maintain the point of the main practice should be free of concepts. You know, that's that might be asking a lot of yourself, but at least we can say that it should be free of distractions, those kind of concepts. We should be mindful and introspective so that we notice when we are not on track in our practice of what the practice is. So anyway, this first point has to do with this kind of confidence and devotion. Devotion to the practice. Have trust and devotion to the practice and confidence based on your own study and contemplation. Now you're ready to apply it. Okay? Then, with steadfastness, so steadfastness means firm. So that means we have to know, again, we have to know basically what the training is. What are the precepts? What is the bodhicitta training? What is the precepts of bodhicitta? So that we're not swayed by our moods. We have mood swings, and we lose our momentum. Or circumstances. You have a bad day, and then you can't engage in your practice because of that circumstances. You're all tripped up because of something that happened during the day, or things like this. So steadfast here means to maintain and to be firm in your practice, not swayed by circumstances or mood swings. And then 3 is respect. Let's say respect and courtesy. Yeah, courtesy means, so these 3 and 4 means respect. Respect here means for mentally, you respect, this has to do with your mind, has respect for the Dharma. and others, all beings. We're all in the same family. We're all in the family of being a sentient being. And then particularly, we have a Dharma family. Those who have entered into the path of the Dharma, have taken refuge in the Dharma. And then it gets more and more detailed, Mahayana, Vajrayana, this one, that one, and so forth. And you have your most intimate family, which are those who you, in a Vajrayana context, who you have the same guru, or at least the same mandala, the same guru, like siblings. So, but we're all, so you should have respect for all this. It's a kind of mental attitude. And then this courtesy has to do with body and speech. You should be polite. Courtesy is like polite. Be polite to your guru. Know how to be polite to your guru. Like that's why Palta Rinpoche in Where's My Perfect Teacher? It's a whole kind of chapter that we should be familiar with about gurus, and then of all others, we should have that kind of comportment. Our conduct should be very easy. We should be very easy to get along with and very polite, kind of faultless in that way. For a bodhisattva, that's important because when we read the first chapter, there was that real punchline in the first chapter that we don't want other people to develop a bad feeling about someone who is a bodhisattva. So a lot of the external, even though bodhicitta, like the vow of bodhicitta, it's all mental. That's why when we break that vow, we can retake it, we can repair it. The pratimoksha, the vows of ordination, almost exclusively, I don't know all 256 or 340 some nuns' vows, but they're about body and speech. They're about conduct, physical conduct and verbal conduct. It's not until the bodhicitta vows that we are talking about the mind. So, anyway, we want to have a very joyful attitude that's respectful and polite, courtesy in our mind, joyful in our mind with respect and joy, and then body, speech, and mind in a very polite, courteous way, so that some of these precepts in conduct for the bodhisattva have to do with how you look to others, because it's very important that you don't create a negative view in the mind of another person towards a bodhisattva. That's important. In fact, I think all these precepts, all the vows of monks and nuns were all in reaction to social interactions with the people, with the villagers or whatever, and how it would reflect badly on the teacher. when they approach Shakyamuni and they say, oh, we go out begging, and now it's a monsoon, and so there's worms everywhere and snails and things that bubbled up. And people are saying, oh, the Buddha's students are going around killing all these worms and bugs and things. And that's not that. So they went to the Buddha and complained to him about that. What do we do? And he said, okay, now when it rains during a 3-month monsoon, we stay inside. We don't go out. That's one of our vows. It's to honor the rain. What's called a rains retreat. Matter of fact, it starts on the full moon of this month in the Theravada tradition. So that's it. So, but in a bodhisattva, it's very important because for someone to harbor a negative thought towards a bodhisattva is very destructive for them. So we shouldn't provoke others, and particularly in kind of a showy way of our kind of equanimity or our I love to eat garbage, and things like that. And then people will develop a attitude that this bodhisattva person's supposed to be a Dharma practitioner, but they're just acting like an idiot. And why would I be interested in Dharma? So like that. So we want to protect other people by this manner. Oh, geez. Okay. Then respect, courtesy. Then with conscientiousness and awe. Okay, conscientiousness. I guess so. It's what this means. This word conscientiousness. Maybe that's what it means. But we should have the ability and almost the wisdom to know when to feel shame, personal shame. This we need. Shame for your own negative actions. And then awe here kind of refers to, well, it refers specifically to how you act around your teacher. I don't know, it doesn't seem to work, but it's a apprehension, and you have an apprehension. You don't. I don't know. Like when I was with a Kala Rinpoche or Chakta Rinpoche, and very uncomfortable all the time. Always felt very uncomfortable. Always worried about my behavior. Didn't want to, say too much. Didn't want to say too little. And like, am I totally, absolutely, 100% honest? And or it was very much walking on eggs. That's the way. That's a good thing. So that kind of being in awe, because well, yeah. Anyway, I won't take more time on that one, but you should. The guru is that your master, your guru is giving you teachings on how to act, your conduct, your verbal, physical, and mental conduct. So, if you, on the one hand, if you have the good fortune to be around your teacher often, then you have to really be careful. That if you're not around them, then you should always think that your guru is above your head and it is aware of you. Or like Shantideva says in the previous chapter, you should always feel as though you're in the presence of the Buddhas. Then you're free of any negative indulgence. So like that. So that awe means, yeah, like how you feel around a kind of a charismatic or intense person. The guru, like in Tibetan, the word guru means heavy. Heavy. Literal guru means heavy. And then the last verse says, work calmly for the happiness of others. So this calm here means peaceful. Again, so that others don't have the wrong view about bodhisattvas. And work for the goodness, the happiness of others. That should be how you do it, and you should do it, like it says, like a swan on a lake, you know, not making lots of waves. I think later in this same chapter, Shantideva really lays down the conduct aspects, but you should work as a bodhisattva. We should adopt a very peaceful demeanor, easy to be around. Lama Chinno. Okay, then I need to finish this actually, so I'm sorry. Let us not be downcast. Okay, this is the seventh of those 9, being depressed about how difficult it is dealing with people who are completely driven by attachment and aversion and stupidity. That's what's called childish. Childish is a commonly used word. It means people who are only the only thing that they are concerned about is attachment, aversion, and these kinds of things. They're under the power of the kleshas, completely under the power of kleshas, and they can't practice dharma. They can't be intentionally restrained, like this kind of idea. So don't be downcast by the warring wants of childish persons quarreling. Their thoughts are bred from conflict and emotion. So don't feel when we are insulted or disparaged or attacked by others. Just don't feel offended. Bodhisattva, we shouldn't feel offended. We should feel compassion. People aren't going to like us. You know, everybody's not going to like us. And even our friends will turn. So we shouldn't feel offended. Just realize that everyone is suffering. And when people speak and when people act, that is an extension or an expression of their suffering. And so we shouldn't respond in any way that would promote or prolong or inflame that suffering. Our motivation, our wish, is to be able to extinguish the suffering, the flames of the kleshas. And so we should feel compassion, or if we can't feel compassion, then we should pray. May I be able to benefit this being in the future, and may the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas benefit them now. And I pray that they become free of their struggles and their suffering. And so through your wisdom of knowing the suffering of samsara, the claustrophobia of causes and conditions, and the truth of impermanence, then with that wisdom and compassion, then that's how you relate to others, not to be personally affected by that. Be open-hearted and warm-hearted, like a mother for their child, a parent. You know, no matter how aberrant they go, no matter how no matter what sentence they get in prison, I don't know how it is, but parents, they still see the goodness of that person. Their thoughts are bred with conflict and emotion, right? Let us understand, or understanding, let us understand karma, understand impermanence, understand the shortcomings of samsara, and treat them lovingly like that. There's in the 7-point mind training, one of the precepts there is don't be predictable. Don't be predictable. This is a very interesting one, and it has to do with this. Don't be predictable. If someone insults you, don't insult them back. If someone is aggressive to you, don't be aggressive back. Don't attack back. If someone hits you, don't hit back. If someone exposes your flaws, someone insults you, or somebody exposes your flaws, then don't expose their flaws. This is the four in our, it's a Jujum confession, talks about these, the four ways of practicing virtue, something like that. So that's part of it. Don't be predictable. Don't do what's socially acceptable or what's culturally expected of you. If you're some kind of, yeah, anyway, we should move on. Okay, when acting irreproachably, when acting irreproachably, that is free from negative influences, for our sake, we're just free of negative influences. We're eating, we're shopping, we're enjoying, we're sleeping, we're doing things, or for the sake of others, we're helping them, we're benefiting, we're practicing love and compassion, we're interacting in a positive way. When we do that, let us always underline, bear in mind the thought that we are selfless, like an apparition. This has so we should always feel that we are in a dream, actively in a dream, that we are in a illusory show, and our body is an apparition. So always bear in mind this thought. And through logic and reasoning, we can also come to understanding that that all phenomena, self and all phenomena, lack self-identity, and they appear merely as an illusion. This we can prove. Things are unprovable to be real. We can't prove that things are real. Matter of fact, even in the 9th chapter, this is mostly now where he's dipping in or previewing a prequel to the 9th chapter, but we can't even come up with there's many examples of illusion, like a reflection of a moon in water, like a reflection in a mirror, like a hallucination, like ripples in the horizon, like a mirage, all these examples of how everything is an illusion. That this life is like a mirage, this life is like a hallucination, this body is like an apparition that was like a hologram. And all our sound that we hear is just an echo. If the originator of a sound doesn't exist in fact, then any sound that comes from that also is just an echo. So this has also primarily to do with how we should conduct ourselves in post-meditation time, this way. And we can also reflect that all of our actions in the past they were all an illusion at the time. Now they're just a memory and they have no reality. But even when they were occurring, they had no reality. They were all just the playing out of causes and conditions that created illusion. And everything that's occurring now, like we say, and everything in the future that I will ever do will not be separate from illusion. So we should meditate in that way. And of course, then if you have this, maybe some, I don't know all, I don't know who, you're definitely an illusion to me. I just made up of pixels. So, but if you said something mean, I would be hurt. What was I saying? Oh, then if you are inclined to Vajrayana, then you have the responsibility or the commitment to always think of yourself in the form of your yidam. Never part from this pride of the deity. So it's in that way. So anyway, that. Then the last sloka, or last verse of this section, this supreme freedom of a human life. This is number 9. Okay, so this is the 9th of these 9 points of practicing virtue. This is how you practice virtue. Really learn these. This supreme freedom of a human life, so long awaited, now at last attained. We've had so many non-human births. Every once in a while we maybe had a human birth here and there, and beginningless time, for sure. But what good, But mostly it's a non-human. We've been a non-human for so many lifetimes. Birth, life, death, birth, life, death. Having to go through all the trouble of making friends and staying with the herd and swimming with the school and doing all these things. So long awaited, now at last it's attained. So reflecting always thus, so always keep this in mind, this precious human birth. We've had, make this birth, like there's nothing special about a human birth. It's just another samsaric life form. And there's nothing particularly special about it, except it can be more destructive, and it can be more, it can change for the better, and it can change for the worse. So most other realms, your distractions are so tunneled that there's no perspective. But in any event, we shouldn't misuse this life by just chasing after one sense pleasure after another, or running away from one sense experience after another. But we should reflect always on this precious human birth and what its possibilities are, how to make meaning, how to squeeze meaning out of this impermanent but very precious life, and maintain your mind as steady as Sumeru. Basically, make your mind like a huge mountain in the Dharma. Keep it firm and steady, and maintain the Dharma and have it blend with your mind so that your mind becomes firm and you won't then, or let's say, in proportion to how the Dharma has blended with your mind, that's, see if I can say this right, in proportion to that, that's how less you will come under the power of obstacles and bad experiences and so forth. That was a little forced. Okay. The more Dharma blends with your mind, the less problems you have. Okay? Just like we were saying, the more you follow the Eightfold Noble Path, the more you bring about the cessation of suffering. Just cause and effect. The path causes the absence of the cause and effect of suffering. And it's not just that at some point way off in the future, the lights will go on and you'll have this enlightened epiphany. That's not how it happens. It happens every day in small, small little thoughts, small little turnings of your mind, small little speech changes, small behavior softening around the edges of your presence. You know? That's how enlightenment happens, like drops in a bucket. Okay? So we'll dedicate the merit of that.